There's so much talk about methylene blue right now that people have started looking at this more natural form of blue-green pigment. But it doesn't operate the same way as methylene blue. I'm talking about spirulina. I'm going to just give it to you right out the gate. But spirulina is amazing, and I've talked about it for years. I encourage you to stick with me through this video because throughout I'm going to tell you potential applications for spirulina, but also going to give you sort of a dosing strategy based on what you're after. But also, since I'm just giving it away right at the front, it'd be nice if you stuck around for the video. That way you can learn about it even though you have the answer right up front. Now, methylene blue is more of a synthetic, right? It is a synthetic, and it's operating on what is called electron carriers and electron donors. So it's essentially directly helping with energy production, whereas spirulina, even though it's naturally blue, it's a completely different category altogether. It's not working along the same axis as methylene blue, but they actually work well synergistically, so this video kind of makes sense to talk a little bit about both. Spirulina is an interesting fat loss tool because it's not thermogenic, it's not typical metabolic amplifier like some of these other fat burners are. It's just a nutrient-dense, anti-inflammatory, hormone modulator, appetite suppressant in an interesting way. So let's just jump right into sort of what it is and how it works. After today's video, put a link down below for 25% off of Seed's Daily Synbiotic. None of this works without good gut health, and Seed has been a supporter of this channel for a number of years, and I really appreciate them allowing us to do what we do. So if you're looking for better gut health, you want to be looking at a probiotic that really does put the science first, which is why they utilize this capsule inside of a capsule technology. So if you've been wondering, like, what probiotic should I go for? If you want to just trust the one that I personally use, and this is the gospel truth, I legitimately use Seed, and I have for the last 4 or 5 years. That would be the one that I would recommend. So that link down below, 25% off their daily synbiotic. So let's talk about how spirulina works for fat loss. First off, from a nutrient density perspective, it has all the key nutrients that are really critical for mitochondrial function. So when people start becoming deficient in some of their micronutrients while they're dieting, particularly like in a deficit, a lot of times they'll lose iron, they'll lose magnesium, they'll lose some of the critical B vitamins, in this particular case from a mitochondrial perspective, vitamin B12 and vitamin B6. So these are 2 vitamins that are very, very, very important for mitochondrial just capacity and the ability to produce ATP. So that's first and foremost. There's plenty of literature to back that up. There was a study that found that after 12 weeks, their overall energy metabolism went up. But what was interesting is this particular study was looking at anemic people, and they found that their actual available iron and their iron absorption went up when they were utilizing spirulina. So this could have explained why their mitochondria was actually working better if they were iron deficient, and then spirulina sort of helped that. So it's not just that spirulina contains iron, it seems to help absorb and allow the proper utilization of iron, which in this case it ended up leading to more diet compliance because they were getting the nutrition that they needed, so they weren't having to have these hunger signals just to get adequate nutrients in, for example. So their body was satiated with nutrients, so it wasn't developing hunger in other ways that weren't going to serve it. This next one is one that's particularly interesting to me. Okay, there's something that's called phenylalanine that is in spirulina. And this has a tremendous effect on appetite, like a significant effect. Now, phenylalanine is technically a precursor to dopamine and to epinephrine. So when you have a precursor to these neurotransmitters, you actually can get a signal that allows you to feel like you got an adequate dopamine hit where it's not just this empty hit. For example, running to the pantry and grabbing something that is just, empty calories. It's going to give you a quick hit, but not actually scratch the itch you're looking to scratch. Now, there's also an increase in what's called cholecystokinin, CCK, which can allow for the gastric system to sort of slow down. And this ultimately ends up down-regulating ghrelin levels and ends up slowing gastric emptying to the point where you're almost having a GLP-1-like effect. You're almost having an Ozempic-like effect where gastric emptying is happening so much slower that you're able to A, absorb more nutrients, but B, you stay fuller for a longer period of time. There was a study that found that spirulina directly influenced hunger hormones. Like, they saw a clear as day signal there. So we have all this other observational data with humans and then this mechanistic stuff with rodents. It's really darn fascinating. And then when you look at the methylene blue side, methylene blue helps with the energy manufacturing that might make it so you have less cravings. So these combination could be really, really cool. The third thing is there's actually lower fat storage signaling. you're actually having less of the signaling telling the body to store fat, which is really fascinating. I'll jump right to a study that found straight up that when subjects were consuming spirulina, I think in this case it was 2 grams per day for 12 weeks, they saw reductions in their body fat as well as a couple other things. Their BMI dropped, their LDL cholesterol dropped, and their appetite went down, not to mention their total BMI, so their total body mass index went down. Well, what's the mechanism here? What's happening? Well, for one, it decreases what's called SREB1, which is what actually synthesizes new fat tissue. So it was decreasing the enzyme that stores and builds fat while increasing what's called PPAR alpha, which allows for better fat utilization, which is why spirulina is so commonly used with like a low carb protocol, because it just helps your body use fat a little bit better. And as far as the LDL side, spirulina can help fats bind to bile salts. So essentially you're able to move cholesterol through the intestinal tract a little bit easier. And now when we talk about a diabetes situation or insulin resistance, there's strong evidence that it increases insulin sensitivity as well. But the real interesting thing is something called phycocyanin. Now, phycocyanin reduces insulin resistance via the inflammation pathway. Insulin resistance is an inflammatory condition, so when inflammation is increased, insulin resistance increases. But phycocyanin reduces the inflammation directly associated with insulin resistance. So kind of a backdoor way, so to speak, of improving insulin resistance and increasing insulin sensitivity. If you don't want to take my word for it, there was a study that, again, with 2 grams per day for 12 weeks, significant reductions in fasting glucose and improvements in insulin sensitivity. And these are human model studies. Let's jump over to a bigger systematic review. This one was published in Oxidative Medicine and Cellular Longevity. And this was a systematic review looking at large-scale human data and animal data combined. And they found that spirulina is a very, very potent, not only antioxidant, but anti-inflammatory. They found that it reduced systemic inflammation across the board in almost even amounts, humans and animals, which means mechanistically it's working on a similar pathway. And what they're finding is reductions in IL-6, reductions in tumor necrosis factor alpha, just overall systemic inflammation reduction, all while increasing glutathione and increasing superoxide dismutase, which are the body's master antioxidants that really have huge jobs of going around the body and neutralizing free radicals and neutralizing them into hydrogen peroxide, which can then be processed by the body. So huge, powerful play to be able to increase the body's natural antioxidants, which is exactly what we're after versus constant exogenous antioxidants. So right now, before we get into dosing, before we get into some of the exercise stuff and fat loss stuff with that, we're saying, okay, how do you take this stuff? Simplest way is just take it in the morning or take it before meals. Taking it before meals is one of the best ways to reduce appetite. It actually happens quick. So the animal models are showing that when you take it prior to a meal, it actually regulates the hunger hormones quickly. So think of it as like a short-acting mild Ozempic. It's the simplest way to explain, except it hits you quick, right? So you can take it pre-meal and it's going to slow gastric emptying. Okay, so that's the main takeaway here to get you to eat less and helps with glucose modulation. But let's talk about like the exercise, performance, and fat loss piece, because this is where spirulina has a lot of research. 3 things. 1, it increases fatty acid oxidation. It actually increases the enzymes associated with fatty acid oxidation so that carnitine palmitoyl transferase, CPT1, elevates, drawing more fat into a fat cell to be burned. Then it's subsequently increasing the mitochondrial efficiency. So the mitochondria can utilize those fuels better, which is half the battle anyway. Getting them in the cell is one thing, but if the cell can't use it, what good does that do? But then there's sort of an interesting thing that it does is it spares glycogen. So particularly if you're on like a low carb diet, you want to spare glycogen. You want your body to use fats as much as possible and then only tap into glycogen when it needs to. Spirulina encourages that to happen more by encouraging more fat to go to the fat cell and spares the glycogen and the carbs for when they're really, really needed, which keeps your muscles fuller and keeps you stronger if you're on a lower carb protocol. The other side of the equation is it increases nitric oxide. So you're increasing blood flow and capillary density in some ways, getting more blood and tissue perfusion, so more nutrient delivery and better recovery. There's a study published in Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. Spirulina increased fat oxidation rates, increased time to exhaustion, and increased VO2 max in just a number of weeks. Now, this is all having to do with mitochondrial efficiency. This very similarly is like what methylene blue does, except via a different pathway. So we're starting to see that maybe the combination of spirulina and methylene blue in this particular performance use case could be really, really interesting. Now, the other piece that we talked about earlier, the phycocyanins, these decrease the oxidative stress associated with higher intensity work. So as there's more intense exercise happening, you have more oxidative stress. These phycocyanins can neutralize some of that oxidative stress, allowing the mitochondria to be more efficient at continuing to make energy even despite the stress. This would explain why there's like more energy available with less reliance on carbs, because the mitochondria is not getting exhausted. It's not having to tap into a quick energy source with carbs. It's able to stay on the straight and narrow and only tap into carbs when it needs to. But then there was another study that found that spirulina decreased lactate accumulation. And it wasn't decreasing lactate accumulation in the sense that less lactate was building up. It was improving lactate clearance. So more lactate was actually leaving the muscle and going back through the Krebs cycle to create energy. In essence, people were able to train longer and harder. And again, combination with methylene blue in that case could be very fascinating, because that's how it would really work. From the other side of the equation, methylene blue is going to provide an additional carrier and a donor, so you're getting more energy, whereas the spirulina is actually helping with the clearance of lactate to push back through that mitochondrial cycle. At the end of the day, spirulina is just a natural performance enhancer. It works really, really well. Methylene blue is more of a synthetic performance enhancer, but combining them is a stack that really amplifies things, because they're not working on the same pathway, but similar. Now, as far as dosing, if you are looking for just the appetite suppression or general fat loss or even nutritional aspect, the B vitamins, things like that, you'd probably want to aim for just 1 to 3 grams per day prior to a meal that you want to eat less of, right? So maybe dinner time. But if you take it in the morning, it could give you energy throughout the day. There doesn't seem to be a huge upper limit. It's highly bioavailable, so the body utilizes it. It's high in protein, 70% protein. So you really could go upwards of that for sure. In fact, from a performance standpoint, I've seen literature talk about 5 to 8 grams. 6 grams seeming to be like a sweet spot. You can definitely take that 5 or 6 grams like pre-workout, and it's going to hit you fast, okay? And the nitric oxide effect might give you a little pump too. So it technically breaks a fast, so you wouldn't want to take it in a fasting state if you were really trying to keep calories to like a bare minimum. But additionally, you could take it with vitamin C, and that's going to help the utilization of the non-heme iron too. So combining it with vitamin C like prior to a meal is definitely not a bad gig. And again, it's one of those things where you can amplify the dose, you can increase the dose, and you might get an even better dose-dependent effect, because we're seeing, although there's a general sweet spot of like 3 grams, it does seem to be somewhat dose-dependent. The more you take, the better the outcome. I don't particularly have a recommended source for spirulina. I don't work with any brands that I could recommend. I think a lot of them are fairly clean. There's a company out there called Energy Bits that is pretty good. I know Thrive Market that I talk about has some. As far as methylene blue, I'm a fan of Troscriptions. I'll go ahead and link out to them down below, because most methylene blue is very, very ridden with heavy metals. So you want to be very careful there. So I use the little troche forms. So I'll also link out to those. As always, keep it locked to here on my channel. See you tomorrow.